we're going to all have a uranium company.
Yes.
But do you feel that this time, because this dip in the price has gone on for so long, do you think there's scope for certain players, again we won't name names, to go and buy up some of these better explorers slash developers, some of the Australian companies I'm thinking of with assets either in Australia or Africa or elsewhere? There are some good projects which are quite short of cash, but just hoping this thing the market changes soon, right? So how do they survive? Do they go keep at trying to raise capital? I know there's a bunch more uranium funds out there. Okay, so that's the good news, like Yellowcake. But how do they keep going? How do they keep the lights on? Do they keep the lights on, or do a couple of big guys come along and say, we'll just wrap things up now while times are tough for them because we know where the market's going?
Yeah, I would like to think that some of the big mining companies would kind of reemerge and come in and, as you say, sweep up some of these good mines that may be suffering financially. What we're seeing, though, is actually the opposite.
Right.
The big mining companies like Rio Tinto, they've been in this business 40 years, are now exiting totally. And I've not heard of any interest, no matter what they think of where the price is going, of coming back into uranium. BHP is a bit of a reluctant participant because they've got.
But for those, I know, but for those big, those are super companies. It's too big. This market is too small. Uranium market compared to gold, compared to iron ore, it's too small. They're not going to do that. But there must be some mid tiers with a bunch of cash thinking this could be interesting.
Yes, but I think they look at they've either looked at uranium in the past and maybe didn't get involved. And then you had Fukushima, and they thanked their lucky stars that they hadn't gotten involved. But yeah, you would think there would be some that would say, hey, this looks like a very interesting area. Now, I have done a number of investor roadshows for Yellowcake, and I say the investment community in general is very interested in uranium. And there's a lot of capital kind of at the starting gate, but they're saying 232. Let's see what the outcome is. When does the market move? How strongly does it move up? And I think it's
But
kind of
but if that's the
everybody.
bottleneck, Dustin, but if that's the bottleneck, if 232 is the bottleneck, all they're saying is timing. All we're
Yes.
talking about is timing here. But they have to do some groundwork on basic due diligence on mining companies, right? There are going to be some good ones and some bad ones,
They're not so good.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to say yes. I've heard that there's several, mid-tier mining companies, high credibility,
Hmm.
availability of capital that are doing that. I've not heard of a one. I
Interesting.
think again, nuclear, depending on which media you follow, is either a strong story or it's going in, down as fast as
Yeah.
you can't. So I think that's part of the problem. It's a strange commodity, like you say, the most regulated commodity in the world. The mine that's proposed for Spain, I understand they have over 120 permits and
Yeah.
licenses.
Yeah.
So it's not a gravel pit. It's not iron ore.
Yeah.
It's just, it's really, really challenging. So,
And I'm not, and maybe it's a discussion for another day in terms of what is the logic that's going on there, because that's an excessive amount of permits by any standard, and I think it's because it's uranium, nothing
it's
else.
radiation, it's uranium, it's, not good no matter what. And so everybody certainly the government side, they want to make sure, be it local government, state government, federal governments, it's the laundry list is almost
Yeah,
endless.
your
Not
backside
all,
is covered.
yeah,
Yeah.
have the uranium in their blood. The one company that I worked for previously was really set up to, when the stars aligned, really move forward quickly. The mine in Namibia was put together in a little over a year. And you just that's a unique situation.
But the thing that's changed there, obviously Fukushima happened, and you can I've had all sorts of numbers thrown at me with that, but I think with Paladin it was a massive marketing exercise, but the marketing exercise was to utilities, to get them to see that you're a good company, you deliver what you say you deliver on time. It would be there, because the biggest crime in the utility space is not ordering and buying product to fill these large reactors. Okay, so but is that the only difference? The fact that this black swan event, Fukushima, and I get Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island before that, and all the safety numbers around that. But is that the only difference between when you were going around the world talking about Paladin and today? What do companies need to do to get people to be positive?
Well, I think, obviously I lived through 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and all of that. I think what was unique about Fukushima was the Japanese were viewed as a gold standard. They were, if you wanted to name a country, at 54 reactors. And for that event to happen, which again took everybody by surprise, and then the aftermath was the shutdown of that entire industry sector, and the length of time, like Gitzel and Kamiko said, nobody thought we'd be 8 years later and they have 9 operating reactors. It's been such a slow. So then you had Germany immediately react. You had some of the, Taiwan, we want to get out of this business because it's unsafe. I think the fact that the tsunami created a situation no one had anticipated, cut off fuel to the diesel generator, all this, we go into the ins and outs of Fukushima.
Yeah.
That's what started everybody stepping back. So, you're basically asking, in the absence of Fukushima, well, the industry have been kind of, I think, continued to grow. It would have been more orderly in my mind.
Right.
You've now lost that orderly progression throughout the fuel cycle. It's not just uranium, but let's just look at uranium. So low price has caused a lot of capital destruction, let's put it that way, and a lot of kind of, I think, lack of interest.
But do you think it's also created new technologies? People are talking about new technologies within the space, not just the SMR, the small reactors, but the technology. The reactors will last 60, 80 years now, not 40 years, right? So that kind of view to safety has been enhanced. And then you've got people like I mentioned previously, Bill Gates, espousing the virtues, and I think even one of Mike Alkin's friends, Elon Musk, would. That's a private joke. Are talking about the virtues of carbon neutral nuclear baseload power. It makes sense. The smart guys are saying it makes sense, but you've got this nagging doubt, this historic, slightly aging view of the industry, which you guys are trying to overcome. And so it's not just 232 and what it's doing for utilities, but it's that public perception for politicians like the Germans, who are reviewing their nuclear stance, as the French have done in terms of delaying it. But does the industry need to work harder at the publicity side of things? I mean, how do they get people over that hump?
As I mentioned, I've been in this business since the first Arab oil embargo, a long time.
Yeah.
And because I think the industry was created by highly specialized engineers and utilities, the communication to the general public has not been a strong suit. Let me put it that way. And just leave us alone. We know how to do that, which was, when I got in this business before 1980, the forecast for the United States was to have 1,000 reactors. I've got that forecast from the Atomic Energy Commission. We got to 10% of that. Okay, but that was the thought. This was going to be, too cheap to meter. It's complicated. Unfortunately, it came out of the weapons side. And so there was always that uncertainty, I guess, or concern. And so then these events, accidents have just added to that.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, going forward, that's why when you look at the forecast of installed nuclear capacity, it isn't a negative number. It's like 1% to 2% growth. And thank goodness the Chinese, keep in mind at the time of Fukushima, they had 13 reactors operating. They have 45.
Yeah.
So this is a program that is on the fast track.
Yeah.
And it's happening elsewhere, but not in the traditional markets.
Just in terms of getting back to, for our retail, high net worth and family office investors, okay, let's make this understandable for them. So it's a very complicated arena. It's a very emotional arena in which people are operating. You've got the fundamentals of mining, which you need to understand. You've got this uranium/nuclear relationship going on, and it's going through a dip in the cycle here. But if you were saying to me that large companies are thinking twice about buying up equity, other public companies, smaller public companies, not just the BHPs, but anyone. You said you haven't heard of anyone thinking of doing this. Why on earth would a retail investor, buy into these shares at the moment? Because there's a lot of noise. And I look back at videos from 2 years, 18 months, a year ago, and people are saying the same things then as they are now. So if I had 18 months ago invested in cannabis, let's say, and I'd reaped my rewards from that decision, and I was looking to invest in something, why do you think uranium is going to take off, and when?
Well, I think, let me reference one of the larger consulting companies in this industry, UX out of Atlanta.
Yep.
They see this demand is kind of behind the dike. In other words, in the absence, let's pick on 232, the utilities would have already been out in the term market signing long-term contracts, some of which would be with these smaller, newer proposed producers. Now, what happens there is you get smaller volumes. In other words, you get a 200,000 pound a year contract instead of 500, because you have to prove that you're going to be able to deliver. Yeah. And so the utilities, what they need is yellow cake in the can. They don't care what your share price is or anything else. They've got to have fuel.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing is, as you say, how do these guys survive? How do they hold their breath? Some were on the drip. They're going to raise a little bit of capital. But then I think that, any day we could have a 232 decision. And the utilities, that was my point about talking to the fuel managers. I want to get this behind me because I need to cover my needs post 2020. In other words, it's not tomorrow I need to buy 100,000. They couldn't care less about that.
Right.
It's I need to cover 5 million pounds a year, starting early 2020s. So what I think is going to happen, actually, I think the situation is more attractive because you don't have 500 companies saying, oh, I can do this. And I think the investor community has learned lessons. They've done their due diligence, and no longer are they going, gee, who in the 500, are likely. You can whittle it down fairly quickly, and it has to do with status of the project, location, management. I think some of the companies that have brought in non-uranium people have found out that because it's such a different commodity, that's another thing, is availability of skilled professionals, management, and even at the mill site, let's put it at kind of the operating site, there's a real lack. Yeah. And so I think you have to step back and say, well, okay, let me look at this universe, and I can get rid of, now, rising tide will lift all boats. I think if we start to see a $50 price, then a geology Well, a
but
geologist
yeah,
will log, you can make some money. But in general, you've got to look at, during the last uplift, it was all Kazakhstan, went from under 10 million pounds to over 50 because they had all these projects that the Soviet system had defined and were kind of ready to go. And the only other one was Paladin. I
yeah.
mean, really, when you look at it, small ISR mines in Wyoming took 5, 6 years because of permitting, and a key factor is term contracts. Just as it's another thing to look at, the Kazakhs transact at the spot price. That's their official transfer price. But in the West, there's never been a uranium project built based on the spot market. It's always
It's
been
always term
based.
contract. And I hear you 100%. I'm going to make you call the timing on this. When's it going to get over 50?
Oh, I've given up forecasting prices a long time ago. I'm one of the. It should be higher at the end of the year
Oh, you're
than
good.
it.
You're good.
Yeah, as you point out, there's a big gap between kind of 25 and 50,
Huge.
which is really the incentive
Yeah.
price. I think, we could see a strong move, and then, depends on who's able to get into business. And so it's going to be an interesting market over the next, probably several years.